I'm happy to be able to present Senate Bill 525. This is a pilot program on a new, it's new to Missouri, it's not new to the country, but it's a response in large measure just to the opioid problems that we're seeing across the country and certainly in our state as well, which don't just deal with adults out of school, but those problems begin very early in many of our high school youth. And so it was actually the development of this idea in Missouri came from Mr. Lou Steele, who approached me and some others some time ago last year and began to talk about what is called a recovery high school. And the recovery high school is a special school which is set up purely for young people, for high school students who are suffering substance abuse and who are ready to recover from that, who are committed to recovery. They may be in a recovery program already. They may be looking for a recovery program, but they're committed to recovering from that substance abuse. It could be anything from alcohol to opioids to fentanyl to any substance abuse. The idea is not untested. These schools are in 20 states, and there are some 42 similar schools across the country that have been very successful in helping students recover from these substance abuse problems. You may be familiar with what we sometimes term in Missouri as alternate schools. I know I visited some of those where students who have some kind of a problem, including substance abuse, might be assigned to that alternate school. And one of the purposes of this is to give special attention, but the Recovery High School is also focused on trying to take a student to a new environment that doesn't have the same temptations, the same draws in terms of colleagues and those who would have influence over that student in a wrong direction. And so because of Mr. Steele's interest in this, he actually commissioned a study that we have copies for each of the committee members, and they're welcome to review that study. The conclusions of that study, and the study was in the Kansas City area. It was primarily focused on the Kansas City area because this is intended as a pilot program. And the study said, yes, the support was there, the need was there. It gave some specific recommendations in terms of developing the actual definitions and programs. I will point out one thing. We will have a committee substitute for this bill because there was a language suggestion that was brought to our attention. In terms of the admission definitions are limited to pupils who are in recovery from substance use disorder, substance dependency, or co-occurring disorders. And it was suggested that might be a broader screening process than was intended, because the intent there is the co-occurring disorders. So the language that has been suggested makes sure that the co-occurring disorders have to be secondary to the other. They have to have the substance abuse disorder, and then it's a suggestion they may also have some of these other disorders. So that's going to define that a little bit more carefully, more precisely, so that there isn't the threat of expanding this beyond the specified reason, which is helping young people recover from substance abuse problems.
The debate over education reform has been happening for many years in this building. Since becoming a senator, I have engaged in that debate. While I understand the view from traditional schools that charters simply make everyone's piece of the pie smaller, the reality is education has to be about opportunity, and particularly for students who may be locked in a failing public school system. This is not an indictment of the thousands of hardworking teachers across our state. I have been visiting my area schools, and without exception, they are working hard to provide a good education. But the difference between the schools in my district and some of the schools that I have been studying in inner cities couldn't be greater. Simply put, if my bill were to pass, charter schools may be operated in a charter county or in a city with a population greater than 30,000. Those charter counties are St. Louis, St. Charles, Jefferson, Jackson, and the cities that would be over 30,000 in population that aren't in those counties are Columbia, St. Joe, Cape Girardeau, Joplin, and Jefferson City. There are many myths about charter schools that are commonly spread. I have often heard that charter schools don't take everyone, which is simply not true. The fact is that these schools can perform better in the areas where they're currently operating than their public counterparts. Why would we restrict that? Why would we not want higher performing schools in other areas with failing public schools? And why do we continue to increase funding for failing schools with no results? Students must come first. If we have students living in a failing school district, we are giving them little to no option. It isn't enough, in my mind, to just say no to alternatives because we fear competition or worry that limited resources become even scarcer. While I do understand that concern, students deserve an education if they are ever to escape a life of despair. I'd like to let the committee know there will ultimately be a couple of technical changes in a committee substitute on the bill. The major one that I would like to let everyone know about is a change in how the audits of the charter schools would be handled. This change would eliminate the state auditor's fiscal impact on the bill. I'd like to thank the auditor's office for working with me and making those changes.